think we'll make a start, and if we do get any late arrivals joining us, I will let them into the room as we go along. Thank you to everybody for joining us today for the roundtable session that we have with Hallpad. I'd like to introduce everybody to Lloyd Coburn, who is the CEO of Hallpad, one of our partners at CUBO. For anybody that hasn't been to one of our roundtables before, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. We do have the chat functionality and the raise hand functionality. If you have any questions throughout today's session, feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat, and we will pass that on to the team at Hallpad. Just a reminder, we do record these sessions, so they are available to anybody that wasn't able to join us on today's call. That will be available later on through the CUBO Knowledge Hub. If anybody does want to go back and have a look at the details from today's session. And at that note, I will hand over now to Lloyd, who will introduce you to his colleagues and run the session today. Thanks again to the team from Hallpad for running today's session.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for attending today. There's some familiar names and faces popping up. I appreciate it's taking time out of your day, so hopefully you'll find it interesting and entertaining and educational. So yes, I'm Lloyd Coburn. I'm the CEO of StudentPad and Hallpad. Many of you will be familiar with StudentPad, which is the market-leading software which helps universities manage and advertise off-campus accommodation. Hallpad is its sister product and is designed to support universities in managing room allocation and conferencing. And a quick selling point here, what sets us apart is our ability to tailor our software to fit seamlessly into your existing processes rather than the other way around. But to come back to today's discussion, we'll be focusing on one of the most talked about hot topics at the moment, which is AI. We're going to explore how it can enhance the student experience when applying for rooms, whilst also helping universities improve efficiency. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to two of our technical directors and also shareholders in Hallpad, which is Ian Leslie and Brian Horrisk, who will lead today's session. Thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, so I'm Brian. I developed the very first version of Hallpad way back in the midst of time, and I'm still involved heavily in customer contact, so making sure that our customers are happy with when they give us a spec that they get what they need. So I'm still very still used to getting my hands dirty in the code if I need to, although most of these days I'm more working the business side. But my actual undergraduate degree was in artificial intelligence back in 1993, before AI was cool. So it's really nice finally to be using it in my professional life, as opposed to it's just something that was on my CV that never got touched. So what we're doing at Hallpad is we're quite early in our process of using AI. So essentially part of the purpose of today's discussion is to find out what you're already doing, what you want people to do, and where we should focus our efforts. So we've got a few prototypes to show you, and I'm going to talk about some of the features which we're investigating but not implemented yet. But we want to get an idea from you of what would actually be useful to you in your day-to-day work, because the whole point of this is to make your life easier. It's not to produce a whizzy demonstration that looks cool. It's to actually have practical uses day-to-day in your job and improve your experience and your students' experience. There are also, of course, going to be cases where we definitely don't want to use AI, and I think it's really important for us to get an impression of that from you, because you will have concerns, your students will have concerns about how AI is going to be used, and we need to make sure that we don't cross those lines of comfort for everyone. So a few of the things I'm going to show you today are talking about automating inquiry responses and sharing your knowledge, generating text, helping your admins do certain tasks, room allocation, data analysis, and forecasting. I'm going to go into all those in a bit more detail. But there are other things as well which we could look at, and if it's something you don't see here, you're interested in talking about, please ask a question about it. So the first one there is inquiry responses and knowledge base, and I'm sure a lot of you have already used chatbots or are investigating chatbots. And chatbots have in my experience, a pretty rocky history. They promised a lot, and until recently were pretty rubbish. But they're getting a lot better. The reason for that was they were previously very rules based, so they pretty much followed a script. So if you ask it would, you'd ask a question, it'd look for a keyword in that question, it would find something with that keyword, and it would parrot back what it found there. And you could put rules as to what it did at certain times, or give it some steer as to where to go. But it was actually more of a big if then else engine rather than doing anything actually intelligent. With LLMs, which are large language models, which I'm sure you've heard about, essentially they have I don't want to say they have a better understanding of the text that they are saying, because they don't actually understand it, but they do have a better impression of the context of the language that's used, and what type of thing you're asking for when you ask a question. So the way these work essentially is first of all, we got to ingest your knowledge, and that might be your knowledge, that might be your license agreements, your policy documents, induction documents, descriptions of accommodation, bits of your website. It might be even video, and from that, essentially, we feed that into a large language model, and it will then organize the information internally in a way that it understands, which bizarrely no one else really understands. It's quite interesting research at the moment of how they actually do this, because very few people actually understand what's actually happening inside an LLM. But what that gives you is this corpus of knowledge that then we can query. And we query it in two ways. First of all, is to let students query it, obviously, so they can have a chatbot on the front end of saying, well, asking very generic questions like, what's the policy in vaping? Will my stuff be insured? And etc. And the LLM will give it an answer from the document it's got. But importantly, because as you've probably heard, AI can hallucinate, I can make stuff up. What's very important is when it responds with an answer, it tells you where it got that answer from, so you can double check it. So it can give you a link back to a specific location of document, a specific time code in the video, or whatever, to show where it got that knowledge from. And you'll find yourself, if you're using Google a lot, where it choose AI summaries, quite often it gets things wrong. And this is one of the reasons why we haven't deployed this yet, and I'm not 100% confident that we will always get the right answer. You'll quite often find it will take two bits of content which are very similar and merge them. For example, I was searching for how to do something in Keynote, which is the Apple presentation software, and it gave me an answer that merged an answer from PowerPoint into that answer, which didn't apply to Keynote. So you got to be a wee bit careful there. But I can deal with those generic questions quite easily. And then, but I can also do if we're integrated with Hallpad, we can answer very specific questions for a particular student. So if it can link to their account, it can know their lease information. So someone asks a specific question like, when's my deposit due? What's my leaving date? Can I leave it early? And we can bring back information specific to that student. That's one advantage of integrating into Hallpad rather than just having a generic LLM chatbot. The second thing is generating text. So I'm sure you've all played with ChatGPT, and you'll have found it's great for generating text for any purpose essentially. And one of the things where we can easily integrate that with Hallpad is in generating your emails. So we already have the concept of email templates, so you can set up standard emails you send to your students, and those are great. But if it's something new you want to talk about, or a situation you've not come across before, it's quite handy to have something generate that email for you. And the big advantage of this is, and I found when I use AI myself in my work, it's so much easier to start with a piece of content and edit it the way I want it to be than start with a blank screen. So what this will do will give you, that initial content to get you started, and then you can edit it, change the language, maybe language you would use, add information, take information out, whatever. Because again, it will make stuff up unless you tell it not to. So, but you can do things like specifying the tone of the email you want to send, and when we integrate this in Hallpad, we're including the tag. So we normally have essentially little mail merge tags in our emails to put in, say, the student ID or the student name. When we pass
now a convenient time to talk.
Sorry. When we pass the data to when we get the data back from the LLM here, we are including those tags so the email will send correctly and be properly formatted. So I've got a quick demo of this for you. This is our standard email process. This would be, in this case, I've picked a blank email template rather than an actual template. But so I've got just dear first name, student ID, nothing else. So I can generate some text from email. So this can be whatever you want. So simple. Let's go for a invitation to a party. Now this is where I have to type while everyone's watching me, which is my weakness. To freshers party next week. Games, mocktails, DJ. Okay, not much information. Let's see what it generates from that. It gives me an email saying, hi, first name. So it's put in the correct mail merge tag. And then it's going to talk about, it's generating emails, invite me to the party. And it's got, and it's a nice light-hearted, And from this, you can see, okay, I wouldn't quite put it like that myself. So you can tweak it, but, or you can add some information in, take it out, but it gives you a good starting point to go from. But you can, and that's again, doing a informal email. I could do a more formal one. So I could do a warning about keeping kitchens clean. And make that formal and say, oh, mention toast crumbs. And it will reload and give me an email about keeping your kitchen clean. So, and again, it has certain bits of knowledge from the context that we're talking about at university. So it knows about accommodation. It knows it may sometimes use American terms because obviously the knowledge has been trained on, includes some American stuff. But you get the gist. It's got enough contextual information to understand just from this very brief description that this is what I want. Any questions on that? I mean, is anyone? You could do this in ChatGPT yourself. You could go to ChatGPT, ask it a question, get some content, and then copy and paste it back into Hallpad. The advantage of the integration here is it's all in one place, but also we're getting all this tagging correct, so that you don't have to do that manually. Okay, I'll go on to the next. Back to my slides. So the next big thing is admin helpers. So this is what's known in the lingo as agentic AI. So essentially, rather than just asking AI a question and getting an answer back in text or a picture or whatever you can get from the LLMs these days, you're asking it to do something for you. So you're essentially getting the AI to start up what they call an agent to go and do a task for you. Now, in this context, the task would be something in Hallpad. So it's great for features you don't use a lot. So for example, your once a year lease template setup. It's something everybody gets support calls about because people have forgotten how to do it, or there's how, what information do I need to put in here? What format does it have to be in, whatever, all those sort of questions that come up. And it's just it's one of the things you do it once a year, so of course you're going to forget how to do it. Yes, we give documentation, we have to go back and read it, but it's easier if someone was to do it for you. And sometimes that's us, we do it for you. But if you could do it yourself, that's even better. So it could be something like you say, okay, could I create a new list template starting the 1st of October, ending the 3rd of June, and apply to rooms 1 to 30 in a specific hall. You could just type that in natural language, and the agent based on training we've given it, would know what the lease template is. It would know where it needs to put the data information, how to create a record, how to save it, but it'll also know there are certain required fields in there. So, oh, it needs a name. So it might come back to you in response to that and say, okay, what do you want to call it? What's the annual rent? And guide you through that process. I'll ask you all the questions it has to know to complete the task. And then it can just go and do the task. Now, this takes a lot more work from us to set up, and we haven't got this up and running yet because it requires a really in-depth. Obviously, we need to feed in that knowledge to it of how to do it, but also we need to be able to give it sufficient access to our system to do that for you. And that brings another issue, which is essentially the guardrails on that. How do we let an agent do this while maintaining things like user roles? So make sure that if you ask it, it uses your role to do the job, so it can't start doing stuff that you don't have the rights to do. You have to make sure also obviously it can't mess up because it's doing something you've forgotten how to do. Will you be good at noticing it if it's got it wrong? Possibly not. So there's a lot of questions there in terms of how we manage that process to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And a lot of my caveats here will be about humans do have to check this at the minute. AI is getting good, but it is not perfect, and it will make mistakes. So it still needs someone with knowledge to check what it does, really. So this is why this might be a little bit longer in coming, but it's the type of thing that could be really useful. Another application of this would be in reporting. So at the moment we have a set of standard reports. We also have a module that you build your own reports. So you can pick from all the fields that exist in the database. You can say, I want first name, surname, student code returned. I want to find everyone who is German or whatever, some other characteristic of the person or their lease. And then I want the results. And I want to display those fields I just mentioned. I want to sort them in a certain order, and then it will go off and do that. But it's quite powerful and lets you do whatever reports you need, but it's a bit cumbersome because you have to pick all the fields from a list and then tell it how to sort them and then tell it, set up your criteria. Is it greater than, less than, equal to, whatever? And it's just, for somebody who's not used to doing the data, it's not that. It's not always a straightforward task. But with an AI, what we could do is take what you say in natural language and convert that automatically to the SQL code that we need to run against the database. So you could say something like, what's our total rental income from Chinese students? We're not going to have standard report on that because it's a pretty unique question, but the AI will know, okay, rental income, for that I need to look at my lease templates. Chinese, that means I look at the nationality of the student attached to that lease. You've asked the total, therefore I can add that up. And it will then generate the SQL for that. We run that SQL against the database and give you your answer. Now, again, there are risks to that. We have to make sure, obviously, it has to have a good understanding of our database structure. That's actually relatively straightforward for us to do. But we also need to make sure it doesn't do something stupid, because this is less of an issue these days, but in the bad old days, it was quite easy for people to write bad queries that would essentially bring a server to its knees, because it was trying to find every student and matching against every other student and doing some searching against some field that hadn't been indexed, and essentially was doing a bad query, essentially. And that could just use lots of resources, cause the service down for everyone else, and cause issues. Less of an issue these days. We've got databases that auto scale and all the rest of it, but there's still a risk that you would do something, or the AI would generate something from this that would not be good to run on your server, or just be dead slow. So again, we need to work on that to work out exactly what those risks are and how to mitigate them. But it would make that task of getting out some ad hoc reporting a lot simpler. Next up is room allocation. Now, we already do this. We already have a module for this. But it's very rules based, and that's pretty much every auto allocation system in it is either rules based or it's random. And I guess ours combines a bit of both of those things. So essentially, it will randomize all students that you've decided to put in a group to be allocated. It will then look at the rules for accommodation. So it might it'll look at, say, their preferences. It'll try to put their first preference. If the preference is available, that's great. But then it'll check certain things. So, first of all, is it a female only room? You can't put a male in it. Okay. Is it if they're the first person in the flat, it's not usually a problem. But you might have rules, for example, that you don't want more than a set portion of either gender or nationality or whatever in a particular flat. So we've got clients who have rules, for example, if a flat has more than 60% male or female, then it shouldn't add more of the same gender into that room because they want to keep it mixed, or into that flat because they want to keep it mixed. So there's all those. So you have to set those rules at start. Once they're there, it can apply the rules, but they're pretty rigidly applied. And again, we work around this by doing things like, well, these are hard rules and these are soft rules. The first way through, we meet all the hard rules. The hard rules and the soft rules. Second time through, we just meet the hard rules, so that some of the rules which are nice to have, like that nationality mix, for example, might get dropped on the second one through, so we place more people. But you'll still always end up at the end with a few people you can't place, because if you've got number of students is equal to number of rooms you've got, quite often when you get to the end of that process, there'll be some students can't be placed because they break a certain rule. Now with AI, we don't give it rules. We just essentially show it what we've done before and let it figure out the rules for itself. So you can still give it some hard rules. So you can still give it a rule saying you can't put a male in a female room, whatever. But beyond that, it's pretty unstructured. Essentially, machine learning essentially is you give it data, start data and end data, and it works out how to get from the start to the end. You don't tell it how to do that bit, or you tell it very lightly, and then it works out the rest. The beauty of that is it might spot things you are unaware of yourself, that you're doing things in a certain way, and that says, well, last time there's some in this situation, they did this, so I'll do the same thing. That can be great. It can also not be great, because if you have, and you've got the risk of bias as one of the issues, there is always the possibility that one of your members of staff or your policy has been to do a certain thing in a certain way, which actually isn't that great. The AI is just going to copy what you did and then continue to do that. So if your corpus data changes, say you get a lot more students from one country or another, the context has changed. So it might, so it may not fully understand what's going on there. And so it may not, doesn't know everything as a person, because obviously there's knowledge that you gain that's not in the data. So it's things like, well, first of all, students might have disability because you're just being just told you. So you'll deal with those first probably. But there'll be other bits like, oh, I can remember that guy from last year. Those two didn't get on. I'm going to keep them well apart. That stuff, the AI is never going to know. So there's a lot of stuff that there are little things that as a human that it's never going to have a clue about, never really going to understand. And by letting the AI do this, we're losing that bit of human touch. So that's risk. But again, those are things you could correct. So you could let it do the bulk of stuff and then just correct things which has got wrong, or the things you want to change because things you know about it doesn't know about. But the other problem with it is fairness, in that it's kind of hard to prove how it got from A to B. So if someone says, well, why did you put me in that room? You could say the computer said so. That's really the only answer you can give. And that's not great. With our current process, we can say, well, we tried to put you in this room, but we couldn't because X. Then we tried to put you in that room. We couldn't do that because of Y. Tried to put you in that room. We couldn't put in because of Z. So we ended up in this room. And we can, on the rare occasion when someone asks to prove it, we can actually show them, the process we went through to get through. We were the 530 started student, to be put in the algorithm, 500, there were only 6 rooms left, so you end up on this one. Sorry, that might not be an issue. It might be something you just say, you're happy to say, well, that's just the way it is. But it's just something to be aware of as a potential drawback. Next up is data analysis. And this is something that can be really, really useful. And it's something like this little feature was actually inspired by something I saw in Strava. Do a bit of running, a bit of cycling. I got a Strava subscription, and what they've recently added is a thing called athlete intelligence. And what it does is it looks at your data and tells you something about it. Now, the data is already there. And if I was if I was a super mega athlete, I'd be reading that data myself. I'd be looking at it every day going, oh, there, look at my pace on that segment, look at how many meters I climbed at the weekend, whatever. And I look at my heart rate, etc., etc. And I would be studying that data carefully. I'm not an athlete. I don't really care about that stuff in great detail. It's kind of nice to know, but I'm not going to spend the time analyzing the graphs to figure it out. What athlete intelligence does is it shows it to you straight away. As soon as you finished your run, it says, oh, well done on your run. That was, 1 minute faster than last time. Your heart rate was in these zones for this period of time, which is really good for fat burning, whatever it is. This is your longest run in the last 3 weeks, whatever. And it just picks out bits of that data and puts it into plain English and shows it to me straight away. So I read it. So all this data that you're collecting and you are creating by getting applications with students, putting them in rooms, taking the rent, all the rest of it, all that data is in your system, but there's a high chance you're not using it very often. I mean, you will use it at a certain time. You've got to produce annual reports. You've got to do some forecasts for next year. But quite often, day to day, you don't have time to get into the detail of it. The beauty of this is it will have a look for you, and it's not going to replace your skill and judgment in terms of knowing what's important. But it can pick things up when you're too busy to look at those things and just give some ideas where to look. So it'll look at your data. It can spot trends, but the key thing about it is it happens automatically and it's regular. So it doesn't wait until, the end of freshers, the end of the freshers period when you've got time to look at it. It doesn't wait until, August is over. It can do it day by day, so you can see stuff as you go along. So I've got a quick demo of this actually working in Hallpad. So what I have here, if I can get my mouse to the right place, is a couple of graphs. This is showing the first choice of accommodation that students have entered in 2 different years. Now, this is totally random, made-up data. It's not real. But you can see the two nice graphs, and you think those graphs and go, you can look at those and go, oh, well, what does that mean? That's Beechcroft 46 weeks. It's a lot less than this year. But you got to look at it and you got to interpret the graphs, which, although we've all learned to do it over time and school and since that, it's still not instant for many people. But what I can do here is just hit generate analysis. This sends some data off to OpenAI and gets back a summary. Now, I've just done that live. This won't be the same response I got yesterday when I tried this. So it has picked out information. So it's picked out the most popular choice was this. It can pick out things like majority of students picked 46-week lease. Now in my data, that's not actually specified as a field. All I have is in the name of the lease, it's got 46 weeks. So the fact that it's picked that out as a stat is something I couldn't necessarily have done by looking at this graph, because I don't have that information displayed. I don't have my weeks displayed here. I just have it in the name of the choice. And then it'll show it sometimes will show a trend. So yeah, so it comes to like an increase in number of students choosing 52-week lease between the 2 years. So it's picking out all that information. And there'll be stuff that will miss. There'll be stuff that is not really a trend or is not significant. But the fact that it's doing this gives you a quick summary of what's going on in your data, and you can go think, oh, don't care about that, or you go, actually, that's something I need to investigate because that will affect policy on this or whatever. So it's really handy just for that, to give you that overview, and then maybe point at somewhere where you should be looking at more detail, what's happening all the time. So that's something we can do now. Now in this case, what I've done is I have actually passed the data, the raw data from these queries to the AI, and it has worked out what's happening. You can just send the graph and it will figure out from the graph what's going on. might not be as accurate. Obviously, the graph might not be, depending on your skills, graph might be totally accurate, but it's a whole lot simpler than necessarily working out the data. And that comes to another issue, of course, of confidentiality. So what we can do here is, so it may be able to assume from my names of my halls which university I'm at. I'm obviously not passing any student names, but what we can do is do things like anonymize the data before we send it. So essentially, we've got some Hall A, Hall B, Hall C. Before we send, we send all C and screen, we change that to Hall A, send that to AI, get it back, swap all mixes of all C back to, or sorry, Hall A back to all C. So there's some anonymization going on there to protect your data. That's because we are using essentially it's not a public system, but it's someone else's system to do this on. We're using someone else's servers to do this analysis. You could do this yourself. You could bring this in-house and have your own servers, run your own LLMs. We're working with a company at the minute that is doing that, but it's expensive. But if that's the most important thing to you is keeping that data internal, it can be done. You can set up your own private instances, which are only accessible to you, which use whatever LLMs you choose to use, because the actual models can be used by your own infrastructure, whether it's under a license agreement or whatever, or some of them are free. But you have that option if you're concerned about that sort of confidentiality issues. So that's analysis of your current data, and that will then lead on nicely to forecasting. And again, this is something we haven't going to be built for yet, because it's a much bigger question about how it will work, how it should work. And that is looking at your current data, taking data from elsewhere. So that might just be general knowledge from the web. It might be knowledge of trends in student accommodation. You could point at, you could give it, I don't know, maybe access to the CUBO website and give it all the data on there. I'm not sure Sarah would be happy about that. Or we give it access to news articles, whatever, about, economic trends, student applications to universities across the UK, etc., etc. And from that, it could start to try and forecast what's going to happen next year. Now, you probably do that yourself, and maybe and you'd probably be better at it, but you may not have time to do it. Whereas this will have, this could be doing this while you're doing your normal job. This can be often looking at stuff and trying to figure out what general trends in society mean for student accommodation. But again, the caveat with that, it won't know the local context. So it might say, okay, UK, there's a drop in student numbers because of visa restrictions, therefore accommodation, requirements will fall. It may not know about the new college opening up in your town next year, or a private going bust, or whatever. Some other bit of information that locally is going to affect your student numbers. And it might not have access to all the data. So, for example, it won't have access unless we give it access to your student record system. So it wouldn't know what your applications look like. But it could do if that information could be fed in if you want to do that. So there's definite possibilities there, but there's a lot to think about in terms of how that should work, what sort of data would be relevant to give it, and then what would be useful answers to you. Because again, if you're saying, actually, our demand doesn't really change year to year, well, this is irrelevant. But if it's something that, say, if some of our clients in central London might think, well, actually, because that's so affected by so many other things in the rest of the economy, and tourism, and terrorism, and lots of other things that might affect local demand, that might be good to know. Okay, so I've shown you some possibilities there. So the questions really are, my concerns are where shouldn't we use AI? So there are certain things we definitely should not be using it for, and that is things like sensitive decisions. So disciplinary cases or welfare-related decisions, those really have to be done by a human. On a large scale, it's possible that AI might give pointers on where decisions that should be made, but the final decision should definitely be left to human. And I don't think we're anywhere near the point where I would want to trust an AI to do that for me. There's confidentiality. We can give it access to data. We can anonymize it before we give it to it, but we need to be very aware of that as that process. You know, what is? Are we really removing all identifiers that we need to? Is there some way someone else or the AI itself could patch together someone's identity from something else in information? You know, it doesn't have a name or address or a student code, but maybe it's a small course with, you know, only a few students on it. There's an example, someone managed to work out Tony Blair's health records based on some NHS data on heart operations. Because the new one had a heart operation, only 6 people had that particular heart operation in the London area in a certain period of time. So we're able to figure out, well, that was the problem that Tony Blair had. So clever people with good intentions or bad can figure out information from your data that you may not be aware of. So we've got to be very careful there. Obviously, there's risk of computer says no. If we're leaving it to the computer to make a decision, you lose that human touch. You lose that, you know, understanding of how people really work, what they want to hear, how to talk to them, all that sort of stuff. So that's obviously a big concern. And then risk of bias. So whatever the AI is trained on, it will reflect those biases. And there are cases in states, for example, of facial recognition, overly assuming that African Americans are criminals because the data it was trained on came from police stations where there were lots of criminals. Doesn't mean that everyone's a criminal. So or reflect the biases of the people who give the information in the first place. So we got to be very aware of that. And then come back to you as a person and you, your staff. AI should assist you, not replace you. And just as 20 years ago, when we first started talking about this, when we were moving off student accommodation and we were moving off spreadsheets and paper licenses and, you know, stuffing envelopes in the middle of August, and we moved online and did online applications and online payments and made accommodation more efficient. That freed up staff to do more face-to-face time and deal with more complex problems themselves. They should be just doing more of that. It's not going to replace all your staff, but hopefully it'll make them more productive. It'll take away some of the grunt work and let them do more interesting and useful stuff, rather than just processing admin. So, any questions on any of that before I ask some? Sorry, I can't see the chat. So, have we got anything happening?
Nothing's come through in the chat so far.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask some direct questions then. Is there anything I've shown today that you think, oh, that'd be really cool, or is there anything today you think, no, definitely do not want that? That'd be kind of my first question. What's your first impression in terms of this might be something useful or something I definitely don't want? Can anyone answer that?
Everyone's gone quiet.
Okay, no, okay. Ian, was there anything you thought?
Oh, hang on, something in the chat there.
Costs. Yes.
Costs.
Average cost. Yes. So that's a very good question. And this something I can't give an answer to right now, but some of these things are straightforward. So, for example, the email integration I showed you, most of there'd be most likely small upfront cost for us to add that feature. Some of these we might just add up as product enhancements. They might just come in as part of the products, and you'll get it if you've got your license, because we think it's something that makes us either gives us a competitive advantage or makes our product better. And the cost to us in doing it is low, because the cost is just is adding the feature. The cost of running the AI, that's where costs can build up. And what we could do in that, in the email example, is let you put in your own API key. So that's essentially your subscription to ChatGPT or whatever other engine we're using, and then you would pay the cost of using it. Now, in all my building demos for this and testing for this, I've used about $1 worth of OpenAI time. So it's not expensive on a small scale. But if you're doing it all day, every day, your costs could build up quite significantly. But that could be costs you could manage because that'll be in your own account. The other features, for example, building the knowledge bases and chatbots, there's a lot more upfront cost in those because there's the training part. There's getting all the data in there it has become more automated, but it's not fully automated yet. There's lots of things where you have to essentially check that it's interpreting data in the right way, and it's interpreting, for example, you can put in a document and it'll show you which bits it's picked up, and it'll show you what it's what data it is drawn from, for example, for a graph, and you can double check those. So there's a lot that's still quite an intensive process. There'll be a setup process there, and then again the what I don't know there is what the AI cost, the cost of running the AI would be. That's something we really haven't got a good handle on yet. So I'm afraid that's a bit very woolly answers, I'm afraid. But short answer is I can't give good answers yet in terms of what that will cost, because we don't really know, and we haven't got a prototype customer trying this yet. Because I think once we've got someone using it for real, we'll get a better idea.
Just looking in the chat as well, there's a few questions in there. Could student satisfaction be built in a survey towards the end of tenancy? Data is very useful.
Yeah, student satisfaction. I mean, that's something you can do with AI. You can do that right now. But for sure, analyzing the data from that is something that the AI could be useful for. So yes, absolutely, that could be done. Yeah. Ian, was there anything else you thought I should mention that I haven't?
No, I think you covered most things. I think the thing I would sort of add to this generally from a technical perspective is, AI is not just all over the news, it's all over everything at the minute. I mean, as a developer, all the tools that I use every day now have AI embedded in them. I actually have to now start to switch it off rather than my choice now would be to switch it off, not to actually install it, and that's changing really quickly. So I think as a business, what we feel here is that this is coming. Everyone is going to start putting it in their software products. Some of it is going to be useful. Some of it is going to be developers playing and is going to be a total waste of time. We want to make the choices that are not the latter, that are not us going, oh, this is really cool, I'd really like to work on this, and providing, sinking a whole load of cost making the product, sprinkled with AI where it's unnecessary and unwelcome. And that's one of the reasons why we're having a conversation like this at quite an early stage.
One thing that we're doing at StudentPad, which is quite cool, is we've got push notifications for landlords to know that they've got an inquiry against the property. Now, sometimes their own computers won't allow those push notifications to come through for various different reasons, settings, etc. By clicking on a button, AI can tell you exactly what to do to enable you to be able to configure your system to allow those notifications, because it knows exactly what browsers you're using, how your computer's set up, etc. Brian and Ian, have you thought of anything like that with regards to Hallpad?
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to the agentic stuff I was talking about, essentially, where we're building knowledge into an AI of how to use Hallpad so that the individual doesn't necessarily have to do it themselves. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things under consideration. Yeah.
Any other questions, or are we wrapping it up?
I'm interested, is anyone using AI in their daily job already, either just in their in their emails, in their accommodation system, and in any other context? Because what I'm working with our team is, because a lot of the coding tools now have AI built in, as Ian pointed out, and a lot of them are really useful. Some of them aren't. Some of them are really good. What I'm saying is, guys, if you find yourself doing anything that is a bit repetitive, a bit laborious, have a stop and have a think. Could AI do this for me? And how would I get it to do it? Like, for example, I had an instance the other day where I had to make up some sample data. It was just for a demo, so it wasn't going to be real data. I could have done it manually by cutting and pasting somewhere, or I could just go to ChatGPT and say, I need this many rows of data. Here are the field names. Go, and it gave me, 400 rows of data that I could just stick into a database. And that's something previous out of, I have to go and find someone who created some sample data somewhere else and download it and then import it, and it'd have been quite a laborious process. But I can totally short circuit that. So is anyone else using AI day to day, and what they find useful?
I suppose
Okay.
it's one of those with AI, people don't necessarily always know that it is AI controlling it behind the technology, if it's a piece of software that they've been sort of added to the systems. But yeah.
Okay, shall we wrap up? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to thank everybody. It'd be remiss of me not to offer a call to action sales opportunity. If anybody would like a demonstration of Hallpad, if you could just get in touch at lloyd@hallpad.com or .co.uk, then I'll gladly set up a full demonstration of everything we do. But again, thank you all very much. And if you've got any questions about AI, feel free to feed those through, and hopefully see you at the conference in June.
Thanks very much to Lloyd and the team at Hallpad. And just to add, I know Jones put a message in about the recording. It will be available on the Knowledge Hub later on this afternoon if anybody wants to share with colleagues that weren't able to make it today.
Okay. And could you send us a copy as well,
I'll
please,
send you a
Sarah?
copy. Absolutely, yeah, no problem at all.
Brilliant. All right.
Brilliant.
All the best,
Thanks
everybody.
very much. Nice to
Thanks,
see everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.